The art of letting go. Stop overthinking, release negative thoughts, forgive your past, and build the calm, confident mindset you deserve. By Vivian Crane. Introduction. The air at 26,000 feet is thin, cold, and tastes like metal. Every breath feels like swallowing a handful of needles. In June 1924, George Mallory stood in that freezing wind, looking up at the gray peak of Mount Everest. His lungs burned. His toes were numb inside his leather boots. Behind him, the rest of the world was a blur of clouds and rock. Ahead of him was the one thing he had wanted for years. He was obsessed. He had tried to climb this mountain twice before and failed. Back home in England, people were watching. They expected him to be the first man to stand on top of the world. He carried the weight of his country's hopes on his back, along with his heavy gear. But more than that, he carried his own refusal to walk away. His friends told him the weather was turning. They told him the clouds were rolling in like a dark curtain. But Mallory couldn't hear them. All he could hear was a voice inside his head, saying, "If you don't do this now, you are a failure. If you turn back, you've wasted your life." Mallory and his partner Andrew Irvine disappeared into those clouds. They were never seen alive again. For decades, people wondered if they made it to the top. When Mallory's body was finally found 75 years later, frozen and preserved by the ice, he wasn't at the summit. He was hundreds of feet below it. He had held on to a dream so tightly that he couldn't see the danger right in front of his face. He didn't know how to let go of the what-if long enough to save his own life. Most of us aren't standing on the side of a mountain in a blizzard, but we know exactly how Mallory felt. We know what it's like to be haunted by something we can't change. We know the weight of carrying a mistake from 2 years ago as if it happened 10 minutes ago. We know the exhaustion of trying to control things that are completely out of our hands. The invisible weight. You might be sitting on your couch or riding the bus right now, but your mind is somewhere else. Maybe it's back in an argument you had last Tuesday, thinking of the perfect thing you should have said. Maybe it's 3 months in the future, worrying about a meeting that hasn't happened yet. This is the state of the modern mind. We are mental architects of ghosts. We spend our best energy building elaborate structures out of things that aren't real. We build towers out of what-ifs and should-haves. We replay old movies of our worst moments, hoping that if we watch them one more time, the ending will magically change. It never does. Instead, we just get tired. We feel heavy, stuck, and drained. This mental weight has a physical cost. It makes our shoulders tight. It makes it hard to sleep. It makes us irritable with the people we love. We think that by overthinking, we are solving problems. We can protect ourselves from getting hurt. In reality, overthinking is like running on a treadmill. You're moving your legs as fast as you can, you're sweating, and you're getting exhausted. But when you look around, you're still in the exact same room. You haven't gone anywhere. You've just used up all your fuel. A famous study from Harvard University found that people spend almost half of their waking hours, about 47%, thinking about something other than what they are actually doing. Most of that time is spent thinking about things that make them unhappy. Our minds are wandering away from the present moment and getting lost in the woods of the past and future. In some parts of the world, people use a very clever trick to catch monkeys. It's called a Chinese monkey trap. They take a heavy jar with a narrow neck and put a piece of sweet fruit inside. The monkey smells the fruit, reaches his hand into the jar, and grabs it. But once his hand is in a fist around the fruit, he can't pull it back out through the narrow neck of the jar. He's stuck. The hunter can walk right up to him and catch him. The monkey could be free in a second. All he has to do is let go of the fruit. But his brain won't let him do it. To the monkey, the fruit is more important than his freedom. He will stay there, trapped and screaming, because he refuses to open his hand. We do the same thing with our thoughts. We grab onto a grudge, a regret, or a fear. We hold it so tight that our knuckles turn white. We feel the trap closing in on us. We feel the stress and the pain. But when someone tells us to just let it go, we tighten our grip. We think that if we let go of the fruit, we'll have nothing. We don't realize that by letting go, we get the one thing that matters most, our freedom. Meet Elena. Elena Vance is 34 years old and living in a beautiful, minimalist apartment in Seattle. On the outside, her life looks perfect. She is a senior UX designer for a big tech company. She's smart, She has a dry sense of humor, and she's very good at her job. But if you could step inside Elena's mind at 11:45 on a Tuesday night, you wouldn't see a successful professional. You would see a woman who is drowning in her own thoughts. She's sitting on her bed, the blue light from her phone reflecting in her tired eyes. She is scrolling through her ex-boyfriend's Instagram page. They broke up months ago, but she's looking at a photo of a coffee cup he posted. She's zooming in on the reflection in the window, trying to see if there's a woman sitting across from him. Her heart is racing. She's analyzing the caption. Does "great morning" mean he's happy without me? Does it mean he never really loved me? This is what Elena calls detective work. She tells herself she's looking for closure. In reality, she's just picking at a scab. Earlier that day, Elena was at work. She spent 4 hours obsessing over an email she sent to her boss. She reread it 15 times before hitting send. And then she spent the rest of the afternoon wondering if the word "regards" sounded too cold. She remembered a project from 2 years ago where she made a $50,000 error. Even though her boss told her it was fine, she still carries that mistake like a heavy stone in her pocket. Elena feels like she's carrying a suitcase that is packed too full. It's the heavy suitcase of her life. Inside are old arguments, fears about her career, and the belief that if she stops worrying for even a second, everything will fall apart. She believes her overthinking is her edge. She thinks it's the only thing keeping her safe. But the suitcase is getting harder to carry. The wheels are broken. The handle is digging into her palm. She is exhausted, and she doesn't know how to put it down. What this book offers. This book is not about thinking positive or pretending that bad things don't happen. It's not about becoming a person who never feels sad or angry. Those things aren't realistic. This book is about becoming a mindful navigator. A navigator knows that the ocean is going to have waves. They know that sometimes the wind will blow the wrong way. But they don't try to stop the waves with their bare hands. They don't sit in the middle of the ocean screaming at the wind. Instead, they learn how to adjust their sails. They learn which things they can control and which things they need to let the water carry away. By the time you finish these chapters, you will have a set of tools to do the same thing. You will learn how to talk back to that inner critic that tells you you're not good enough. Why your brain is biologically wired to remember the bad stuff more than the good stuff, and how to override that system. The 3 pillars of radical acceptance that allow you to stop fighting reality so you can actually start changing it. How to forgive yourself for mistakes you made years ago so you can finally stop paying for them. A way to make decisions without getting stuck in analysis paralysis. You will move from being someone who is dragged behind the car of their emotions to someone who is actually behind the wheel. You will learn how to live in fluid confidence. This is a state where the past is a teacher you've already listened to, and the future is an adventure you're ready for, rather than a monster you're hiding from. Why you can trust this path. The ideas in this book aren't just nice thoughts. They are based on 2 things: hard science and thousands of years of human history. We will look at modern psychology, like the 90-second rule, which shows that the physical feeling of an emotion only lasts about a minute and a half, unless we keep feeding it with our thoughts. We will look at how our brains create loops and how we can physically break those pathways. We will also look at people who survived the hardest things a human being can go through. We'll meet Marcus Aurelius, a man who had to run the entire Roman Empire while dealing with plagues, wars, and people trying to steal his throne. He stayed calm not because his life was easy, but because he practiced letting go of everything he couldn't control every single day. We'll learn from Viktor Frankl, a doctor who survived the horrors of a Nazi concentration camp. He discovered that even when everything is taken away from you, your clothes, your family, your home, you still have one thing left. You have the freedom to choose how you feel about your situation. That is the ultimate letting go. It's letting go of the idea that the world has to be a certain way for you to be okay. The road ahead, we are going to start by looking at the voice in your head. That inner critic is usually the one packing your heavy suitcase. We'll learn how to turn its volume down. Then, we'll explore why our brains love to replay our worst moments. We'll look at history to see how leaders like Alexander the Great literally burned their baggage so they could move faster. We will dive into the 3 pillars of radical acceptance. This is the secret to stopping the mental friction that wears you out. We'll see how people like Thomas Edison used this to rebuild their lives after losing everything. We will spend time on the 2 hardest parts of letting go: forgiving ourselves and forgiving others. We'll follow the stories of Winston Churchill and Nelson Mandela to see how they released the ghosts of the past to find their true power. Finally, we will build a daily plan. We'll look at the rituals of Benjamin Franklin and the focus of Harriet Tubman to see how to stay present even when life is chaotic. As for Elena, we will follow her as she tries these techniques. We'll see her at work, in her relationships, and in those quiet moments at night. We'll see if she can finally put down that phone, unpack that suitcase, and find the calm she deserves. The journey from being a mental architect of ghosts to a mindful navigator isn't a long walk. It's a series of small choices. It's about learning when to open your hand and let the fruit go. It's time to stop climbing a mountain that doesn't exist. It's time to breathe the clear air of the present moment. Chapter 1. Silencing the Inner Critic. On June 18, 1858, a letter arrived at a quiet house in the English countryside. Charles Darwin held the paper in his shaking hands. He had exactly one day to decide whether to throw away 20 years of work or finally tell the world his secret. He was 50 years old, and for 2 decades, a voice in his head had been screaming at him to stay silent. That voice was his inner critic. It was a loud, mean judge that told him he wasn't ready. It told him his ideas were dangerous. It told him he would be hated by everyone he loved. For 20 years, that voice had won. Darwin had thousands of pages of notes hidden in his desk, but he was too afraid to print them. He lived in a state of constant overthinking, checking and rechecking every tiny detail of his theory. The letter in his hand changed everything. It was from a younger man named Alfred Russel Wallace. Wallace had come up with the exact same idea as Darwin, and he was ready to tell the world right now. Darwin's time had run out. He had 24 hours to either let go of his fear or watch his life's work disappear into the shadows of history. The myth of the helpful critic. Most of us believe a lie about the voice in our heads. We think that if we are hard on ourselves, we will perform better. We believe that if we stop worrying, we will lose our edge. We treat our inner critic like a coach who is trying to keep us from making mistakes. We think that by replaying our failures over and over, we are learning so we don't do it again. This is a myth. The truth is that Darwin was a genius, but his overthinking didn't make him smarter. It made him sick. For years, he suffered from terrible stomach pains, skin rashes, and shaking hands. Modern doctors believe these were symptoms of extreme stress. His mind was attacking his body because he couldn't stop the loop of what-if thoughts. He told a friend that sharing his theory felt like confessing a murder. He wasn't being careful. He was being held hostage by his own mind. Think about a heavy suitcase. Imagine you are standing in a hallway, holding a bag filled with bricks. You think that holding the bag makes you strong. You think it prepares you for the journey ahead. But as the hours go by, your arm begins to ache. Your shoulder cramps. You can't move toward the door because the weight is too much to carry. You aren't preparing for the trip. You are just getting too tired to actually go on it. This is what happens when we listen to the inner critic. It doesn't help us avoid mistakes. It just makes us too tired to try anything new. It creates mental friction. Friction is the heat and resistance you get when two things rub together. In your mind, friction happens when your desire to move forward rubs against your fear of being judged. That heat burns up your energy and leaves you exhausted before your day has even begun. The Judas cradle of the mind. In the Middle Ages, there was a terrible device called the Judas cradle. It was a wooden pyramid with a sharp point at the top. A person would be lowered onto it, and the weight of their own body would cause them pain. Our negative thoughts work the same way. We are being hurt by something outside of us. We are being hurt by the weight of our own thoughts. We sit on the sharp point of a bad memory or a future fear, and we let our own mental weight press us down. Darwin did this for 20 years. He lived at Down House, a beautiful home with a garden and a path he called the Sandwalk. He would walk that path every day, but he wasn't looking at the birds or the trees. He was trapped in a simulation of the future. He was imagining the church leaders calling him an atheist. He was imagining his wife, who was very religious, being disappointed in him. He was building a world of what-ifs that didn't exist yet, and then he was living in that world as if it were real. The inner critic loves to build these simulations. It takes a tiny piece of data, like a boss not smiling at you in the hallway, and it builds a whole movie where you get fired, lose your house, and end up alone. By the time you get to your desk, your heart is racing as if the movie has already happened. You are reacting to a ghost. Seeing the person in the purple robe. Long before Darwin, a man named Marcus Aurelius sat in a tent on the edge of the Roman Empire. He was the most powerful person in the world, but he struggled with the same loud, critical thoughts we all do. He had to deal with people who lied to him, people who wanted to steal his throne, and the constant fear of making a mistake that would destroy Rome. Marcus had a trick for silencing his inner critic. He called it de-veiling. When he felt intimidated by a king or a powerful general, he would remind himself that they were just human beings. He would tell himself, this man is just a person who eats, sleeps, and goes to the bathroom like everyone else. He would look at a fancy purple robe and say, this is just sheep's wool, dyed with the guts of a shellfish. He stripped away the labels. He didn't let his mind add importance or scary to the things he saw. He just saw them as they were. We can do the same thing with our thoughts. Your inner critic might say, you are a total failure because you missed that deadline. If you use the Marcus Aurelius method, you de-veil that thought. You strip away the labels. You tell yourself, I am having a thought that says I am a failure. That thought is made of words. Words are just sounds or shapes in my head. They are not the truth. They are just a reaction to stress. When you see a thought as just a thought, rather than the truth, it loses its power over you. It's like seeing the monster in a movie and realizing it's just an actor in a rubber suit. It might still look scary, but you know it can't actually hurt you. Talking to yourself like a stranger. Science has found a very simple way to gain this distance. A study by researchers at the University of Michigan looked at how people talk to themselves. They found that when people use the word I, they stay trapped in their emotions. If you say, I am so nervous, you feel the nervousness in your whole body. But if you use your own name, something strange happens. Elena is feeling nervous right now. Your brain shifts. It moves from the emotional part of the brain to the logical part. You become an observer instead of a victim. You are looking at Elena from the outside, the same way you would look at a friend. This is called cognitive diffusion. You are unsticking yourself from the thought. Imagine you are watching a river. You are standing on the bank, watching leaves float by. One leaf is a bad memory. Another leaf is a worry about money. As long as you stay on the bank, the leaves just pass you by. But if you jump into the river and try to grab the leaves, you get wet. You might even get pulled under. Silencing the critic isn't about making the leaves disappear. It's about staying on the bank. It's about saying, there goes a leaf called, I'm not good enough. That's an interesting leaf. Now where's the next one? Name it to tame it. There is a biological reason why this works. When you feel a sharp negative emotion, a part of your brain called the amygdala takes over. This is your lizard brain. It's responsible for fight, flight, or freeze. It doesn't think. It only reacts. When your inner critic starts yelling, your amygdala thinks you are being attacked by a tiger. It shuts down your ability to think clearly and floods your body with stress chemicals. But when you name the emotion, when you say, this is anxiety, or this is shame, you activate the prefrontal cortex. This is the human brain. It's the part that does math and makes plans. The moment the human brain turns on to name the feeling, the lizard brain has to quiet down. You cannot be in deep, blind panic and careful observation at the same time. By labeling the critic, you take the steering wheel back. You might say, oh, there's the perfectionist voice again. It's worried I'm going to look silly. Thanks for trying to protect me, but I've got this. Elena in the meeting. Elena Vance sat in the Monday morning stand-up meeting, her fingers tapping against her coffee cup. The office was bright and smelled like expensive beans and floor cleaner, but Elena felt like she was in a dark tunnel. A junior designer named Sarah had just pointed at Elena's latest project on the big screen. I wonder if we should try a different color here, Sarah said. This blue feels a little bit old-fashioned. In an instant, Elena's inner critic was screaming. She thinks you're a dinosaur, the voice said. Everyone in this room thinks you've lost your touch. You spent 5 hours on that blue. You're failing. You're going to be replaced by someone 20 years younger who works for half the price. Elena felt her face get hot. Her first instinct was to snap back and explain why Sarah was wrong. She wanted to defend her blue, like her life depended on it. She felt the heavy suitcase of her past mistakes, the project error from 2 years ago, pressing down on her shoulders. But then she remembered the bank of the river. She took a slow breath. Elena is feeling threatened, she told herself silently. Elena's inner critic is trying to protect her by being angry. She looked at the screen. It was just a color. It wasn't a murder confession like Darwin's theory. It was just pixels. She looked at Sarah. Sarah wasn't a monster. She was just a 24-year-old girl who liked bright colors. She was just a person in a purple robe. That's an interesting point, Sarah, Elena said. Her voice was steady, which surprised her. Let's look at some other options. What did you have in mind? The meeting moved on. The world didn't end. By using her own name and labeling the feeling, Elena had stopped the lizard brain from taking over. She hadn't silenced her inner critic, but by naming it, she had taken back control. The critic, the voice was still whispering that she should have been firmer, but she had stopped listening to it. She had set the suitcase down for a moment, and her shoulders felt an inch lighter. The courage to be imperfect. Back in 1858, Darwin realized that he couldn't wait any longer. He couldn't wait until he was sure. He couldn't wait until the inner critic was happy, because the inner critic is never happy. Its job is to find flaws, so it will always find them. Darwin agreed to let his friends present his work along with Wallace's. A year later, he published On the Origin of Species. It wasn't perfect. He didn't have all the answers. He even included a whole chapter called Difficulties on Theory, where he listed all the things he didn't know yet. This was the ultimate act of letting go. He told the world, here is what I have. It's not finished, but it's here. The backlash he feared did happen, but it didn't kill him. In fact, once the secret was out, his health began to improve. The murder had been confessed, and the ghost was gone. He realized that the 20 years he spent overthinking hadn't protected him from the critics. It had only stolen 20 years of peace. Your mental audit. To start letting go of your own inner critic, you have to realize that you are not your thoughts. You are the person hearing the thoughts. Think about it this way. If you hear a radio playing in another room, you don't think the radio is you. You don't think the news reporter is your own voice. You are just the listener. Your mind is a radio that is always playing. Sometimes it plays great music. Sometimes it plays static. And sometimes it plays a talk show where the host is a jerk who hates everything you do. You can't always turn the radio off, but you can stop believing everything the host says. You can walk out of the room. Here's a small way to practice this today. 1. Notice the I. When you feel stressed, listen for the I statements. I am a mess. I can't do this. 2. Shift to the third person. Replace I with your name. David is worried about the meeting. Sarah is feeling overwhelmed by the laundry. 3. Label the critic. Give the voice a name. Call it the judge or the worrier. When it starts talking, say, "Oh, the worrier is back. He's very loud today." This doesn't make the thoughts go away instantly, but it creates a small space. And in that space, you find your freedom. You realize that the suitcase is heavy, but you are the one holding the handle. You are allowed to let go. Elena went back to her desk after the meeting. She looked at her reflection in the dark computer screen. She didn't look like a dinosaur. She just looked like a woman doing her job. She opened her design file and changed the blue to a slightly brighter shade. It wasn't a big deal. As she worked, the voice in her head started to complain about her lunch choice, but she didn't dive into the river. She just watched the leaf float by. She had more work to do, and for the first time in a long time, she had the energy to actually do it. She was learning that the critic wasn't her coach. It was just noise. And the more she ignored the noise, the more she could hear the quiet, confident person she was becoming. The journey was just beginning. She still had the wedding invitation to deal with, and she still had the ghost of her ex-boyfriend following her into coffee shops. But she had a tool now. She knew how to name the ghosts. And once you know a ghost's name, it starts to lose its power to haunt you. Chapter 2. Why do we replay our worst moments? The sun hung over the Gedrosian desert like a heavy brass plate. There was no wind. The only sound was the rhythmic crunch, crunch, crunch of thousands of sandals hitting the dry, cracked earth. It was 324 BC, and Alexander the Great was leading his army home. Behind the soldiers stretched a line of wagons and pack animals that seemed to go on for miles. This wasn't just an army. It was a moving city. For years, these men had fought their way across Asia. They had won, they had conquered kingdoms, and as they did, they collected things. Gold statues from Persia, intricate silks from the edge of India, furniture made of ivory, even heavy jars of spices and wines. Every soldier had a baggage train, a pile of treasures that represented his past victories. To the men, these items were proof of who they were and what they had done. They were trophies of their glory. But as the heat climbed to over 100 degrees, those trophies started to feel different. The wagons got stuck in the deep sand. The horses groaned under the weight. The army, which had once moved like a lightning bolt, was now crawling. They were so focused on protecting their stuff from the past that they were losing their ability to survive the present. Alexander watched his men. He saw them stumbling, their eyes fixed on the wagons instead of the horizon. He knew the desert ahead was a killer. If they kept clinging to what they had gathered, none of them would make it out alive. One morning, before the heat became unbearable, Alexander called a halt. He didn't give a long speech about the dangers of the desert. He didn't argue with his generals. Instead, he walked to the center of the camp, where his own royal wagons were parked. These wagons were filled with the most incredible treasures in the world, things he had spent a decade fighting for. He took a torch and threw it into his own baggage. The silk caught fire first. Then the wood of the wagons began to pop and hiss. The soldiers watched in total silence as their king's history turned into a pillar of black smoke. Alexander didn't look back. He didn't cry over the lost gold. He just watched the flames. Then he turned to his men and gave a simple order. He told them to do the same. Slowly the soldiers began to move. They brought their precious silks, their heavy statues, and their boxes of gold to the fire. They watched their worst moments and their best moments burn together. As the wagons disappeared, something strange happened. The mood of the camp changed. The heavy, tired feeling vanished. Without the weight of the past dragging behind them, the men felt light. They felt fast. They felt like an army again. They had let go of what they had so they could become who they needed to be. The brain's broken archive. We imagine a quiet room where books are neatly tucked away, waiting for us to pull them off the shelf when we want to remember a birthday or a fun vacation. But if you struggle with overthinking, you know your brain doesn't work that way. Your brain is more like a detective who is obsessed with cold cases. Instead of remembering the time you won an award or the time a friend gave you a great compliment, your mind prefers to zoom in on the time you said something embarrassing in a meeting 3 years ago. It wants to replay the moment someone broke your heart. It wants to loop the memory of a mistake until you can see it in high-definition, 4K resolution. This isn't because your brain is mean. It's because your brain is a survival machine that hasn't had an update in 10,000 years. Back when humans lived in the wild, remembering where a tiger lived was much more important than remembering where the pretty flowers grew. If you forgot about the flowers, nothing bad happened. If you forgot about the tiger, you died. This created what scientists call negativity bias. Our brains are wired to Velcro the bad stuff and Teflon the good stuff. We are biologically programmed to replay our worst moments because our ancestors used those replays to stay alive. Your brain thinks that if it plays that embarrassing memory enough times, it will eventually find a way to make sure it never happens again. It's trying to fix the past to protect your future. The problem is that you can't fix the past. Replaying a memory doesn't change what happened. It just creates mental friction. The coffee shop ghost. Elena Vance sat in a small coffee shop in Seattle, her hands wrapped around a lukewarm oat milk latte. For a moment, she felt okay. The sun was hitting the brick wall across the street, and the smell of roasted beans was comforting. Then she saw them. A couple sat 2 tables away. They weren't doing anything special. The man was laughing at something the woman said, and he reached over to tuck a lock of hair behind her ear. It was a small, kind gesture. In an instant, the coffee shop disappeared for Elena. She wasn't in Seattle anymore. She was back in her apartment 6 months ago, on the night her 3-year relationship ended. Her brain hit the play button. She could hear the exact tone of his voice when he said he didn't think they were growing in the same direction. She remembered the way the light from the hallway hit the floor. Most of all, she remembered the things she didn't say, the perfect argument she should have made to make him stay. She sat there for 20 minutes, staring into her cup, replaying the breakup over and over. She looked for clues. Was it because I worked too much? Was it that comment I made about his parents? If I had just been more patient that one Tuesday, would we still be together? By the time she snapped back to reality, her coffee was cold, and her chest felt tight. She felt exhausted, as if she had just finished a long run. But she hadn't moved an inch. She had just been carrying her baggage train through a desert of her own making. Elena was experiencing the Zeigarnik effect. This is a psychological quirk named after Bluma Zeigarnik, a psychiatrist who noticed that waiters in a busy cafe could remember every detail of an unpaid order. But the moment